fund your passion. Just like Anushka and Radhika, like
I think it was Jason who mentioned how your work stress, you don't realize it, but it sort of takes a toll on your family and your friends.
Actually, reliving those moments was just so much fun.
So the game was loads of fun, and we're back for the second part of the recap session. Sharon, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay, it's interesting. It's
What's the episode?
the episode I hosted, Beyond the Paycheck, and
It's
yeah,
the last episode.
that's the last episode. It's an interesting episode, insightful episode, because we got three speakers from three very different backgrounds. We had Shehan from the tea background, the tea industry, managing large organizations, and very different to what Dinner manages, which is a small business, GEP. And then we had someone from the law field, which is Prasadi, and they had very different opinions on certain things, but at the same time, it was so similar, the way it was said. And going back to what I mentioned during the first segment of this podcast was Dinner mentioned saying using your company as your vehicle to drive you to your passion. So to add to that, Prasadi mentioned that when you're at an interview, it's always best to ask your interviewer, like, where do I, like, what's my ladder? Where do I have to go next? What am I supposed to do to build my career at this company? What does your future hold for me? And your company should be clear with you, saying that this is what you have to do, like this is where you will go next, because then it's easy for you to align those values that your company holds with your own goals. And then it's like, if you keep on working for some place that doesn't give you that growth and development, you're just going to feel overwhelmed, burnt out, and you'll feel like there is no purpose of you working in that place, right? When you work somewhere, you want to feel fulfilled, engaged, you want to feel happy, and you spend most of your time at your workplace. You don't want it to take a bad effect on you, on your mental health, and be stressed and hate going to work, because that's where you can actually build. Because at school, we are told what to do. This is your exams. You're supposed to study for this, and this is it. Like, when you come to work, you're challenged in a different way. You face different challenges every single day, very unexpected. So the place that you work should be able to, mold you into that person that you want to be and fund your passion. Just like Anushka and Radhika, like during the boss moves, mentioned, like, you need that financial support. So that would come only from a company or work culture that understands you and provides that for you.
And supports what you want to do.
Exactly. So yeah, that was a very interesting and insightful podcast. And even Shehan mentioned that your loyalty towards your company is valued, but you also have to understand when it's time for you to grow and, technologically how to develop yourself, because in Sri Lanka, you say there's kind of still a backward approach when it comes to like working in the tea industry. Especially, you don't have machine equipment like plucking teas and everything, so you need that people. So they having to educate them and get them to that standard and level and that speed that you want your company to move. You need to really speak to people, understand them, and you have to have that people skills, to communicate, to like empathize with them. So yeah, that was
I feel like in that industry specifically, like, people are reluctant to change and adapt to new technologies and new things, and he stressed about that as well, which is very important. Like, especially after COVID, we saw how companies while some companies coped with like the changes, some others just were driven back.
And Shiham mentioned that it's a major issue that kids nowadays don't want to go into tea plucking. So they wouldn't have workers in the future, and you, like I mentioned before, don't have machinery. So we have to be open, like, about what we want to do. It's any job is not small or big. It's how you look at it. There's a need for it. That's why it's a job. So yeah, being open to things like that and being free at the place you work, and like Rue mentioned, Mel mentioned, ownership of your task before. Yeah, extreme
Yeah.
ownership. Dana mentions
Dana
that's
mentioned,
again during
first-
this podcast as well. So you need to be able to give back to the company you're taking from. So owning up to your tasks, doing it properly, and being grateful at the end. Like, if it drives you to your passion or your goals, you should be able to give back to it the same way. So yeah, I feel like that's a very insightful episode, podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I will go next. Let's take this one. Cool. So I got the episode that I hosted, which was on social contribution. This was called Passion,
the
from
one,
Passion to
Chopper.
Purpose. The one.
The VIP guest.
Yeah.
Chopper's episode.
Personally, I think this episode was something that really spoke to me because there is this big part of me that always wants to give back to society. And we had three amazing speakers who ran their own non-for-profit organizations. There was Denham, who ran Live, Love and Give. Then we had Timothy from Word and Deed Lanka, and we had Shilpa, who brought Chopper from Tales of Freedom. And all three of them were really amazing, and the work they really shared a lot of their experiences and their story on how they got into this, because you don't ever start saying, I'm going to start life with something like social contribution. It's something that you eventually end up in or choose to follow. And something really incredible about all three of them was they all had the chance to kind of live abroad because they had the work opportunity or study opportunity, and they had a chance to stay back. And when many of us would have gone for that opportunity, they came back and they wanted to do something here. And the work they've done with all three of those organizations is so amazing. And we had three segments as usual, and all three segments we had spoke about their journey, and then we spoke about why social contribution is so important. And the last thing was to do with getting involved in social contribution. So few of the things that they said, that there's a lot of things that they said that really inspired me and stayed with me so much. But some of the things they spoke about was the ripple effect, which is where you'd go and do something for someone, where Shilpa was saying like they had parents who'd come and adopt dogs, right? I to mention what Tales of Freedom is, actually it's an organization that rescues and rehabilitates dogs who were used for breeding. So there's a lot of purebred dogs there, and she was saying like if you kind of you see parents who come and adopt those dogs, and then you see their children coming and like volunteering with them and doing more, and it's just that small action that you take kind of that has that ripple effect. And even Timothy mentioned it with Words and Deed Lanka, where they also work with women, and they work with students and kids a lot in the tea estate areas, and how giving them or providing them education has really taken them a long way. And for me, I really wanted, like listening to them, I really wanted to be like in their shoes, like do something like what they're doing one day. And finally, the last part was was also very inspiring, because they spoke about how do you get involved. And I think one of us mentioned it earlier about taking that first step. That's something they mentioned, like just kind of first thing to do is to identify what your passion is. It can be anything. It can be animal welfare like Shilpa is, or it can be about women or uplifting children or communities. You kind of know what your passion is, and then to just take that first step. And people think it's like to do with funding, but it's not always funding, and it's not even always volunteering. You can take that first step, but they also mention that you can even go ahead and contribute your skills. Like let's say you're good at sewing, you can go and teach it with one of those organizations, and like teach that skill to those people, and they would gain so much from it. So again, there's a lot spoken in that in that episode, and I would definitely tell everyone watching this to go watch that. So yeah, that was episode 9 on social contribution.
Yeah, I think the difference in like a lot of people get it wrong, like how much people value time and how much people value money. And here, I think this episode really shows how much of an impact you can make by investing your time into helping people. It's not only always about money. Sometimes it's a lot of people like it's needed definitely. Like donations are needed, but like people going and visiting these places, talking to these people, understanding what they really need is also a very important aspect of social contribution.
It's not just a one-time thing that
Yeah.
you
Exactly,
do.
yeah.
It's like it's capacity building, right? Like, so whatever community or thing that you're helping, you don't just do a one-time thing and you leave.
Yeah.
And that's again where commitment comes in. It's just as important as money or monetary donations. So I think they really highlighted that part.
But,
like,
I think Jenna mentioned about how at Live, Love and Give they have 3 milestones, right? It was immediate aid, capacity building, and training and empowerment, and how they work for all 3 of those milestones. And it was a pretty good episode. Yeah.
And Chopper was there. So.
Yeah.
I mean, Chopper made it interesting at
Yeah.
one point. I was like, Chopper, are you going to jump onto me? Please don't.
And
Chopper
he
was
behaved really well during
Yeah, he
the
was a
podcast.
good- he was a good
well
guy.
trained.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was actually one of those rescue dogs, so it's a good one.
And also, I think Shilpa mentioned about not on camera, but she mentioned why he was named Chopper. I think.
Did she?
Yeah.
I don't think I was there for that.
Yeah. I don't remember the whole story,
Yeah.
but it had like a backstory.
Okay.
He was like rescued through something.
Yeah. See, even there, like Shilpa has invested so much of her time into, and even the volunteers, to take care of these dogs, give them exactly what they need.
And more than like the money, it's the happiness and that fulfillment you get with what you're doing towards those animals or even the society when you take from the others' perspectives. Yeah. Who's going next?
I'll go.
Leave the easy ones for us, please.
I don't know which one.
While you're casting a spell on it.
But
the
she
agriculture is cool. Okay, so I actually couldn't listen to this as soon as while it was being filmed, and I watched it a few weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, and it was very insightful. I feel like even if you are not interested in the subject of agriculture, it's something that you should watch because it really opens your eyes into what can be done and what isn't being done, especially in a country like Sri Lanka where we're living, and in comparison to what's being done globally, what we're not doing here and what could be done here, it really shows, right? I think Leshan, Teshan, and Nekmi, they really knew what they were talking about. It was very interesting to see. So Nekmi comes from a background of spices. She's gotten into the spice industry.
Manufacturing, right?
Yeah, and then Teshan, Teshan and Leshan both they've had white collar jobs, up until maybe a good 3-4 years ago, and then they gave everything up and decided to get into agriculture, which both their stories are amazing because to take that leap, with no fear is amazing. Something because both of them had very stable jobs, and for them to say, you know what, I'm going to take this next step, that's huge, especially into an industry like agriculture, right? Because there is a certain stigma, especially in society here. There is a stigma, you know, when you say this is what I do for a living.
People
So
tend to look
Yeah.
down
look
on
down
you.
upon it, yeah. But then their stories are superb, you know, to listen to. And Leshan, he's actually trying to make it better for farmers, that to ensure that they get what they deserve as a return. Whereas at the moment they've been, I wouldn't say mistreated, but they're not being compensated enough for what they're doing. They're being, in a sense,
I
for
think
lack
they
of a better
were not
word,
given enough.
yeah, they're being cheated to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
there's lack of transparency.
Lack of transparency in the industry, and Leshan's trying to sort of eliminate or sort of reduce that. And it's really nice to see, you know, and according to what they've said, and I can imagine it's a very tedious process, right? And Teshan also, you know, he's in the field for most of the day, and listening to him speak, it really brings into perspective how valuable natural resources are, because he was explaining how much they value water in the dry zone there, because he needs a lot of water to sort of run the entire field, but then it's scarce, right? So you need to know how to manage, and like those things really put things into perspective of how different it is in the city and how we look at things. And then another thing is how lucrative the industry can be if you actually study it. But then a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, because of the stigma, they don't really look into it. But there is so much opportunity there. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, you know, and you have to really get your hands dirty and, you know, work hard. But the rewards are definitely there. And Teshan and Ethni both mentioned how, you know, at the end of the day, it's essential for our survival, right? It goes back like to, you know, ages and ages where agriculture has been developed through the years, and we've always needed food, and in the future we will always need food.
Yeah.
So it's very important, and they mentioned it's very important that the young generation like gets into it.
Yeah, and they see it as a
understands
place of
exactly,
opportunity.
they understand that there are opportunities here. And one more thing, how we need to be able to adapt to change. The issue, especially I'm talking from a local context in Sri Lanka, how the Azo techniques have been brought from back then to
Up to
up to this day, and they haven't changed. They haven't adapted new techniques, although the chances and the technology is available. They're not ready to, you know, make that change, and they're losing out a lot because they're not making that change. So that's something that the three of them said is a challenge for them at the moment, making farmers and people involved in the industry understand that this change could help them, could benefit them. It's just tough because they are so set in their ways. So I think, you know, to all the listeners, I know I've said this before, but please watch this episode. It's an amazing episode, very, very insightful, and it'll change your perspective on a lot of things. And yeah, you'll learn a lot. So
when you actually think about it, it's funny how, say, we take a meal that we have,
yeah,
we take it for granted,
Yeah,
right?
the
We
amount of
don't
work
we don't see the
yeah.
amount of work,
Exactly.
I mean, the sweat that goes
Yeah.
behind it, all that energy that people put into
Yeah.
it. It's
a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said, you know, it really puts things into perspective. So please watch the episode.
I'll
yeah.
go next.
Yeah.
Okay. This is close to me, so pressure again. Finance.
What's the name of the episode, Nilu?
Finance. Yeah. Okay, so this was also a very insightful episode, mainly because these three speakers, we had Gaston, Charisma, and Shane, they had a lot to speak about, you know, especially people like us, I mean youngsters, and how we can manage our finances, you know. Shane spoke about how important it is to have your finances planned. It's like building a castle or a house, right? You have to have a blueprint to build it upon. And say your plans may be different if you're someone who is on the younger side. What did I say? Yeah.
Unlike auntie over here.
So if you're someone who's young, I mean, your plans and your goals might be different. You might want to save up to buy a car, you might want to like get a small apartment or a house, whereas for someone who's more matured, you look at saving up for your retirement, right? They stressed a lot about that, and it was very insightful actually. Knowing my spending patterns, it was like a hard hit on the head.
A lot of takeaways from that episode.
I think it
For
put
sure,
all of
yeah.
us in our
Oh,
place.
yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
I think that segment also, the first one on like personal finances, they gave like a
Yeah.
lot of good tips.
Lot of
Like
good
the
tips.
one on
Yes.
like, what was it?
Cash pockets.
Cash pockets,
No,
yeah.
cash envelope.
Cash,
Cash
yeah.
envelopes. I actually started doing that
Yeah.
after listening to that episode.
And
Yeah.
like about how important it is to have multiple revenue streams and multiple accounts, because you can have a track of your spending, otherwise we'll just spend away like
I
we
think,
have all the money in the world.
Gaston mentions it. He says, Excel is your best friend.
Like to track.
And that's very true.
And yeah, also speaking about Gaston, he spoke about, he like spoke for the ladies and all the girls out there, and mentioned how important it is to be independent in your finances, especially as a woman, because I mean now it has changed again, but before, like, women like tend, or they used to rely on their husband or spouse to manage their finances, right? But now we all look at being independent with our own things. And adding to that, Charisma also mentioned about how important it is to have a supportive partner. That, I mean, you may have different goals, but you should be able to be driven towards it together. And yeah, it was, again, like, it puts you into deep thought. Like, there's a lot
I think
that
overall,
goes around
all these
it.
episodes, they at certain different points, they do that to you.
I think
you
it
know?
confronts you
Yeah.
in so
Yeah.
many ways. And
Also, I think Charisma mentioned about the importance of having a mentor. If you're not good at managing your finances, you can always speak to someone who's good at it, or who can give you valuable advice.
And I think the last segment was when they finally they spoke about for people starting small businesses, like how they would
Yes.
manage their finances. So I
Yeah.
think that kind of goes along
Along
with
with,
the
Boss
Boss
Moves
Moves
episode,
one.
yeah.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
they could always
Yeah,
come
lot
and
of the
watch this
episodes
if
are
you had like
interconnected if you look at
a
it.
Also, I remember Gaston mentioning you have to be able to bargain until you're
Yeah,
embarrassed.
embarrassed.
If
Yeah.
not, you're
If you're not
not
embarrassed,
doing it correct. But
It's a
I
very
mean,
good point.
when you think about it, it's like, nah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're someone who's owning a business or who's running a business, it actually plays a huge role, because you would want to save every single penny and like add to the revenue.
Bottom
here.
line, profit. Yeah.
So yeah.
And not forgetting his interaction with Donald Trump. I don't know if you all remember the story. Yeah, it caught me out of the blue. I was very interested by what he had to say. That was a good story. I think if any of you all want to hear what he said about his interaction with Donald Trump, you have to go check out the second
That's
episode.
the second episode.
Yeah.
On
Which is
finance.
called
Finance.
Finance. Yeah, just finance. But yeah, once again, a really good episode. They had a lot of good things to share. Yeah.
And we're left with
Yeah.
True.
Mom,
well,
you have
not
no choice. Yeah.
Okay, before you take it, would you guess, because we did all the 9 episodes and you just
Why do you
have
think you
one
did?
left.
I'm
last
assuming it's mental health because I was
Really?
waiting until that came up because I wanted to speak on it. So,
Has to be.
Ding, of course. So the crucial role of mental health in success. I think it was one of those episodes where we tried to connect success in the corporate world directly with mental health, and we had Jason, Dimitri, and Ashinka, Shay's sister, on the podcast. And I think one of the
main points that all three speakers stressed on was that mostly in Asian countries, how it's such a taboo topic, like we are so confident to go to a doctor when we have a physical injury, but then when it comes to something that you're struggling mentally, it's almost something like you have to hide or to be embarrassed about. So all three of them, they're very successful in their corporate life, and they are leading senior roles. So they spoke about how they try to bring that awareness into the work culture, so that there's a sense of that taboo is sort of broken. So Dimitri spoke about how it's important to, like, if there's an individual who's struggling with a certain challenge, mental health challenge, it's important that if you're in a senior position, you need to understand their capacities. They might have challenges in a certain area, but
they might be good at
something
something else.
else, and you have to allocate them accordingly, so that that person also feels a sense of fulfillment and they can maximize their strengths. And I think it's a very important thing, because you can see, like, most of the time you are just allocated to a role, but like when whether you have a challenge or not, like, just to understand who you are as a person and match up your skills with that. And I thought that was such a refreshing approach. And also he spoke about, like, having the buddy system, and having I think this is now happening quite often now in the corporate world, but having like an in-house counselor or a therapist, so that employees can directly go speak to them and not have to feel that pressure of having to go to speak to a senior. So I think they gave a lot of tips on how, if you're in a senior position, how you can bring awareness to mental health and create a culture that sort of encourages people to speak more about it. And then if you have an issue, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's okay, you have a challenge, just work on it, like that sort of thing. So it's very, very insightful. And then we also spoke about, like, how important mental health is on your journey towards becoming successful. And a question that I think a lot of people would have is, like, how do you manage burnout? Like, that's something we all struggle with. And like how Dil said, stress stresses you.
Don't stress about stress.
And one thing that Ashinka mentioned was, like, instead of pushing yourself to the point where you break, you mindfully take mini breaks in between. So you keep going, but you don't hit the point of burnout. You take the break when you feel like you're getting there, before you hit that point, and refresh, and then come back. Then you have a renewed mindset and an attitude towards your work. And also something she and even Jason stressed on was how support from your family or the people close to you plays an impact on your mental health and your journey towards success. And I remember Ashinka saying, like, even when she was wanting to come to the podcast, she was scared and nervous, but then it was her husband who, it was just a simple word, like, you can do it. But the importance of that, even that words of encouragement. So, like, how success, yes, you're the one doing the work, you're managing your own thing, but like that input you get from your support system is so important, like, just even if it's a simple word. So it opened up my eyes to, like, because when you think of mental health, I always used to think, okay, it's always the severe case, it's all the clinically mental related stuff. But then they spoke about the little day-to-day stuff that we go through, like little anxieties to stress and all that, and how that is just as important, how you can manage it. And hearing their perspectives, holding such senior position in organizations, it was really nice to know that, okay, there are organizations like that who cares and who wants to incorporate that. So definitely a super insightful episode as always. But if you're someone who really wants to, like, get to know, understand mental health, or if you're in that field, it's definitely something to watch. I think those were some of my favorite moments from the episode.
And I think it was Jason who mentioned how your work stress, you don't realize it, but it sort of takes a toll on your family and your friends, because it affects your relationship with them without you knowing, right? And that's scary because you're unaware of it.
Until you hit a point,
exactly,
and then it's too late. And everyone, like, they stressed on how it's important that okay, like if you come home, if you're gonna spend time with your family, you switch off yourself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
bring your
yeah.
work home. As cliche as it sounds, I think it's very important because like that's something we always do. Like okay, you go have dinner with your partner or like your family, but then like
Your mind is
your
somewhere.
mind is
Yeah.
somewhere. So they spoke about like how it's important to take that time off, and Jason said like your journey towards success is fun, but after that it's not as fun, and like you should always remember like that's not the only thing. You know, you have like
There are other
being
aspects.
number one, being
Yeah.
the best is not the most important thing, but having a well balanced life and maintaining that's the most important thing. So yeah, it was a really good episode. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, all our episodes are good.
Good job, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Not
no,
all of it.
Yeah, no, overall, I think the season was really good, you know.
It was all interconnected.
Yeah, looking back now, it was all very interconnected, and the speakers had a lot of unique things to share, you know. And I think we also learned a lot, developed
It was very
ourselves by
relatable.
hosting the episodes as
Especially
well,
knowing
right?
the fact that you can relate to them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
and
right.
that you can, you know, somewhat you see, okay, you make sense.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was nice to see we had people of all ages from different backgrounds doing different things, you know. And
And they were super raw, like
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't
They were
afraid
very honest,
to
yeah.
speak of the embarrassing moments,
Yeah.
the sad moments, everything. They were super raw, and I think like we really appreciate our speakers. They were amazing. So that brings us to the end of our recap session. Actually, reliving those moments was just so much fun, you know. I can't wait to go back and watch it. And if you guys want to watch the full episodes, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for an exciting season 2, which is already in the works. And one last thing before we wrap up, I just want to say we will be introducing GEP's very own short-term programs, which is taken directly out of the content that was covered in all of these episodes. And it's going to be filled with practical knowledge, and it's going to keep you engaged throughout. So please stay tuned for that, and you'll know more about how it's going to work and all the information that you need to know. So until next time, see you guys.
See you later.
Bye. Bye.
if you enjoyed that video, make sure to like and subscribe to the GEP YouTube channel. And we also have a bunch of very interesting practical short courses which are related to the episodes from the podcast. So stay tuned.